They didn't need to reopen the past. They met because carrying it any longer had become heavier than speaking it. The cafe was the kind that tried not to be noticed. Beige walls, soft music that never rose above the clink of cups. A chalkboard menu written in careful handwriting, as if clarity could keep the world from getting messy. Outside, the morning had that thin winter light that made everything look honest. Claire arrived 2 minutes early and hated herself for it. She stood just inside the door, letting her eyes adjust, letting her breath settle, pretending she wasn't searching the room. Her coat was still buttoned, her scarf still looped like armor. She could have taken them off. She didn't. Then she saw him. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking down at his hands, palms flat on the table, like he was trying to keep them from moving on their own. The man she remembered had always seemed in motion, restless, certain, quick to decide. This one looked quieter, heavier. Not older in a way that felt like loss. Older in a way that suggested weather, time, consequences. His hair had gone more gray than she expected. Not fully, but enough that she noticed it first. His shoulders were broader than she remembered, or maybe his posture had changed. He carried himself like someone who'd learned to bear things without talking about them. Claire felt her throat tighten. A small betrayal. She hadn't come to be moved. She walked to the table with a calm she didn't fully own. He looked up as she reached him. His eyes found hers, and for a moment, something in his face shifted, like a man who'd practiced being fine and suddenly forgot the script. Claire, he said. Her name sounded different in his mouth than it did in anyone else's. She didn't like that it mattered. Daniel, she answered. And the simple fact of saying it made her pulse jump. They stood there an extra second, both of them held by a polite uncertainty. In another life, there would have been an embrace, a kiss to the cheek, a hand on her back. Something easy and familiar. In this life, there was space. He pulled out the chair for her. It was a small gesture, familiar, and it landed in her chest like a pebble dropped into deep water. Thank you, she said, sitting. He sat after her, careful as if he didn't trust the floor. The table between them suddenly felt too small and too wide at the same time. 2 cups of coffee sat untouched. He nodded toward hers. I remembered you used to take it black. Claire looked at the cup. I did. You don't anymore? She almost smiled, almost. Now I do, half and half. My doctor would have opinions about the rest. Daniel let out a low breath, something that might have been a laugh if he'd allowed it to be. Of course. We're at the age where everyone has opinions. Claire glanced at him. Including us. He held her gaze a beat longer than necessary. Then his eyes dropped, not out of shame, out of caution. They sat in the quiet that follows the first few words. When the easy parts are gone and the real ones are waiting, Claire wrapped her hands around the cup, more for something to do than for warmth. The ceramic was hot enough to demand attention. It was a relief to feel something simple. Daniel's fingers circled the rim of his own cup without lifting it. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. Claire's mouth went dry. You asked. I know. His voice softened. Still. She stared at a small chip in the tabletop. I almost didn't. Daniel's jaw tightened, then released. Like he was letting her have that truth without argument. Outside the window, a couple walked by slowly, bundled in coats. Their steps matched. Claire watched them for half a second and then forced her eyes back. Why now? She asked, and it came out steadier than she expected. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the napkin holder, the sugar packets, the small framed print on the wall that nobody would remember 5 minutes after leaving. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Because I've been carrying something. And it's getting heavier. Claire's fingers tightened around the cup. He glanced up. I don't want to disrupt your life. Claire felt a flicker of irritation, sharp enough to taste. You don't know my life. He nodded once. That's fair. The music shifted to a different song, still soft, still forgettable. A barista laughed quietly behind the counter. The world kept moving, indifferent. Claire took a sip of coffee. It was too hot, and it burned her tongue. The sting grounded her. I got your message, she said. You didn't give details. You just said you wanted to talk. Daniel swallowed. I wasn't sure what I could say in writing. Try, Claire said, and then gentled it. Here, now, try. Daniel's eyes moved over her face like he was relearning it. She felt suddenly exposed, the way she did in dressing rooms with harsh lighting. She'd chosen a simple sweater, neutral, nothing that asked for attention, and yet she was being seen. "I saw you," he said finally. Claire's heartbeat stumbled. "Where?" "At the hospital." Her hands went still. Daniel's gaze stayed on hers, steady now. "I was there with my sister." She had a follow-up. "I was in the lobby and—" He stopped, as if the rest was too intimate to say aloud. "You walked past. I knew it was you." Claire's mind flashed to fluorescent hallways, the smell of disinfectant, the low hum of elevators. She remembered being there recently. Too recently. She also remembered the way she'd kept her eyes forward. "You didn't say anything," she said. "I didn't think I had the right." He breathed in. "And then you turned your head just a little, like you felt someone looking." And for a second, he stopped again. Claire forced herself to speak. "And for a second what?" "And for a second," he said, voice low, "I thought you were going to see me." Claire's grip on the cup loosened. The coffee was cooling. The heat in her face wasn't. She looked down. "I didn't." "I know," Daniel said. The tenderness in his tone annoyed her more than anything else. She didn't want tenderness. Tenderness was dangerous. Tenderness was how you forgot why you learned to protect yourself. Claire set the cup down with more force than necessary. The liquid trembled. "Daniel," she said, "if this is about closure, I'm not sure I'm the person who can give it." His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger. "In focus, I'm not asking you to give me anything." "Then why bring me here?" He inhaled and she saw his chest lift under his coat. He looked like a man bracing before stepping into cold water. "Because I realized," he said, "that I've been living with a version of what happened. And I don't know if it's the truth." Claire's stomach tightened. "The truth," she repeated, tasting the word. Daniel nodded. "I've told myself a story for years. One that made it easier to move on. To build a life. To be functional." Claire felt the sting behind her eyes, surprising in its suddenness. She blinked it back. And now it's not working," he said. "I can't keep pretending that what I remember is enough." Claire looked at him closely. The lines at the corners of his eyes were deeper. There were faint shadows under them. He looked tired in a way she recognized, the tired of someone who handles things for other people. She didn't want to feel anything for him, but she did. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Exactly." Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He looked past her shoulder toward the window, as if he needed the outside world to remind him how to speak. "I want to tell you something," he said at last. "Something I should have said then." Claire's breath caught. He reached into his coat pocket slowly, not dramatically, but with intent. His hand came out holding a small folded piece of paper. Not a receipt. Not a note on a napkin. A letter. Claire stared at it as if it might bite. Daniel held it between them without pushing it toward her, as if offering it and not demanding she take it. "I wrote this," he said. "A long time ago." Claire's voice barely worked. "Why didn't you give it to me?" Daniel's eyes lifted to hers, and something raw moved through them. "Because I thought you'd already decided," he said. "And I was too proud to ask you to reconsider." The cafe seemed to get quieter. Or maybe Claire's hearing narrowed to only him. Her fingers hovered near the paper. But she didn't touch it. Almost touch. A familiar kind of hesitation. The kind that used to mean anticipation. Now it meant fear. "Daniel," she said. And her throat tightened around his name. "What is this?" He kept holding it. "Steady. It's the truth," he said. Claire stared at the letter between them. Her hand suspended in the air like a decision she wasn't ready to make, and in the space of that almost touch, she felt it, the old gravity, the old pull, the old danger. She drew her hand back. "If I read that," she said quietly, "I can't unread it." Daniel nodded, the movement small and solemn. "I know." Claire looked at him, then at the letter, then back at him again, as if searching for a version of herself that already knew what to do. Outside. As if searching for a version of herself that already knew what to do. Outside. That already knew what to do. Outside. The morning light strengthened, turning the window into a pale mirror. For a moment she could see them reflected there, two adults dressed in ordinary clothes. sitting at an ordinary table on an ordinary day, and yet everything in her body knew this was not ordinary. Claire took a slow breath. "Are you sure?" she said, her voice thin but controlled, "that you want me to know what you're about to put in my hands?" Claire didn't reach for the letter. Not yet. Her hand stayed in her lap, fingers laced together so tightly her knuckles ached. She stared at Daniel's thumb where it pressed the fold, keeping the paper closed like a promise. He didn't push it toward her. He didn't pull it back. Either. The restraint felt deliberate. It was the kind of restraint you learned when you'd already broken something once. "I didn't bring it to hurt you," he said. Claire let out a breath that sounded steadier than she felt. "Then why bring it at all?" Daniel's gaze didn't flinch. "Because it's been sitting in a drawer for years like a quiet lie." "A lie," she repeated. "A lie by omission," he said. "And I'm tired of living around it." Claire looked away, out the window, because looking at him felt like letting him touch her again, without permission. The street was waking up. A delivery truck. A man walking a dog that didn't want to move. Two women in athletic wear carrying coffees as if they were late to something important. Normal life. Her life was normal now. Mostly. She could go back to it if she stood up right now. If she walked out, got in her car, drove home, answered a few emails, did laundry, made dinner, watched something forgettable, went to bed. She could do that. But the letter sat between them, small and quiet, and the room felt like it was holding its breath. Claire turned back. "What do you expect to happen after I read it?" Daniel's jaw shifted, like he'd prepared for the question, but not for the way it landed. "I don't know." Claire gave a short laugh that had no humor. "That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have," he said. "I'm not here to rewrite your life. I'm not here to ask for anything you can't give." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You keep saying that." "Because I mean it," he said. His voice dropped. "I know what it looks like when someone comes back and asks you to undo years of work. I'm not doing that to you." Her throat tightened at the phrase "years of work." Because it was true. It had taken work, not just to move on from him, but to rebuild herself into someone who could live without needing answers that never came. She swallowed. "So what are you doing?" Daniel lowered the letter to the table, not sliding it across, just letting it rest there. His hand stayed on it, palm open now, as if he was no longer guarding it, just admitting it existed. "I'm trying to stop being the man who ran," he said. Claire's stomach turned over. She didn't speak. Because if she did, she might say something sharp. Something protective. Something she'd regret as soon as it left her mouth. Daniel continued carefully. "When I saw you at the hospital, it hit me. How quickly a life can narrow. How fast it can become only appointments and waiting rooms, and we'll see." Claire's chest tightened. "That's not," she began, then stopped. Daniel watched her. "I'm sorry. I don't know why you were there. I'm not assuming." Claire held his gaze. The truth was close enough to touch, and she felt her body resist it. Her father's face flashed in her mind for half a second. The tired slump of his shoulders. The way he'd tried to make jokes about things that weren't funny. She forced the image away. "I was there for a friend," she lied softly. Daniel didn't challenge it. He nodded once, like he understood the function of a lie. Like he respected it. Claire hated him for that too. Silence pressed in. The barista wiped down a counter. The espresso machine hissed. A couple at the far table spoke in low voices. The kind of conversation you had when you didn't want the world to hear you. Claire looked down at the letter. "How long ago did you write it?" she asked. Daniel's eyes stayed on it. "The week after you left." Claire's breath caught before she could stop it. She hadn't expected that. The week after, not associated with a birthday or a holiday or a dramatic event. Just a week. Ordinary time. Time that had once held them both. "And you kept it," she said. "I tried to throw it away," he admitted. "More than once." Claire's voice came out brittle. "You could have mailed it." "I could have," he said quietly. "And I didn't." She looked up. "Why?" Daniel's mouth tightened. His eyes didn't. "Because I was afraid it would matter." Claire stared at him. He said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. Like fear was an everyday object you could set on a table and call by name. Claire's heart thudded once, hard. Fear it would matter. She sat back, forcing distance between herself and the letter without moving the letter at all. You're saying a lot, she said, without saying the thing. Daniel nodded. I know, then say it. Daniel's gaze lifted to hers and stayed there. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. Claire's throat tightened. She hated that her body reacted, that some part of her softened before her mind could catch up. She spoke carefully. You left. He nodded. I did. And you let me believe. Her voice cracked, and she hated that most of all. She steadied herself. You let me believe I was asking for too much. Daniel's face shifted, the smallest flinch. I didn't mean to, he said. But I did. And that's on me. Claire stared at him and felt anger rise like heat, slow and righteous. You let me carry that, she said, quieter now. For years. Daniel swallowed. I know. Claire's fingers curled in her lap. Do you have any idea what it does to you, thinking you were the one who pushed too hard? That you were the one who wanted more than you deserved? Daniel's eyes were glossy, but he didn't look away. He took it like a man who'd been waiting for it. I'm not here to defend myself, he said. That's convenient. It's not convenience, he replied, voice steady. It's respect. You get to say what you need to say. Claire shook her head once, small. You always did that. The reasonable thing. The calm thing. And it made me feel like the emotional one. Daniel's expression tightened. You weren't emotional. You were honest. Claire felt something break open behind her ribs, something tender and dangerous. She lifted her chin. Then why didn't you stay? Daniel's eyes dropped to the letter again. His hand moved slightly, not toward her, just along the edge, tracing the fold. Because I thought I would ruin you, he said. Claire froze. Daniel looked up again, and his voice was low, almost ashamed. I had my father's temper in my bones. I could feel it. I could feel how easy it would be to become him. And you were good. You were building a life. You deserve stability. Claire stared, caught between disbelief and a familiar ache. You decided that for me, she said. I know, he whispered. I know. The cafe felt too small now. The table too close. Claire leaned forward, her voice controlled, measured. So you left to be noble. Daniel's eyes flashed. No, Claire blinked at the force of it. He exhaled and softened again. I left because I was scared. The noble story came later. Claire sat back slowly. There it was, the kind of truth that sounded plain. Almost disappointing until you realized how much it explained. Fear, not of her. Not of love, of what love required. Claire stared at the letter again. Daniel's hand moved away from it, finally. The paper sat there unguarded, waiting. Claire's fingertips touched the edge of it, barely. The paper was cool, thin, ordinary. She slid it closer, not all the way to her. Just enough that she could claim it without fully committing. Daniel didn't move. He watched her, still as a man who knew any sudden motion would shatter something. Claire, he said softly. She didn't look up. If I read this, I'm going to have feelings about it. I'm counting on it, he said. And the honesty of it hit her like a quiet slap. Claire lifted the letter, the weight of it small but unmistakable. The fold was tight, creased from being opened and closed too many times. She held it in both hands and didn't open it, not yet. Her eyes flicked to Daniel's face. What if it changes what I've had to become? Daniel's gaze held hers, steady and unprotected. Then he said quietly, maybe it was always going to. Claire stared at him, the letter unopened. Her pulse loud in her ears, and before she could stop herself, she said the thing that frightened her most. What if it changes what I still feel? Daniel didn't answer right away, not because he didn't have one, but because whatever he was feeling crossed his face before he could decide whether to hide it. That's not something I can control, he said finally. Claire nodded, slow. I know. She looked down at the letter again. The paper felt thinner than it should have, as if the words inside had already been worn down by time. She ran her thumb along the crease, remembering the way she used to do that when she was nervous, folding and unfolding anything within reach. Daniel watched her hands, not her face. You don't have to read it now, he said. You don't have to read it here. Claire let out a breath. If I take it with me, I'll read it alone, I figured. And if I read it here, she continued, I'll have to look at you afterward. Daniel met her eyes. I'll be right here. That landed harder than she expected. She glanced around the cafe, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. Of how strange it was that something this fragile was unfolding in a public place with neutral walls and indifferent strangers. She slid the letter back onto the table. I'm not ready, she said. Daniel nodded, the motion careful, accepting. Okay. She watched him closely, half expecting disappointment, pressure, something that would prove he hadn't really changed. There was none. Just patience. Earned or learned, she couldn't tell. Claire leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. You said you weren't here to ask for anything. I'm not. But you are asking me to sit with this, she said. With you? Yes, he said, simply. She studied his face. The familiar planes softened by time. The man who had once felt like the future and then disappeared into memory. Why now? She asked again, quieter this time. After all these years. Daniel's gaze drifted past her to the window, to the street beyond. Because I woke up one morning and realized my life was very full, he said. And very unfinished. Claire felt that settle in her chest. He turned back to her. I don't regret the life I built, but I regret the parts of myself I left unexamined. But I regret them examined. You're one of them. The honesty of it left her momentarily speechless. She took a sip of her coffee. It had gone lukewarm. She didn't mind. Do you tell everyone you regret them? She asked lightly. Daniel smiled faintly. Only the ones who mattered enough to make it hurt. Claire huffed a quiet breath. That's a dangerous standard. I know, he said. I've lived with it. They fell into another pause, not awkward, but waited. The kind of silence that invited memory if you weren't careful. Claire thought of the apartment they'd shared once. The sound of Daniel moving through the kitchen in the mornings. The way he used to stand behind her, hands resting at her waist, not asking for anything. Just there. She pushed the memory away before it could sharpen. You look different, she said suddenly. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Good different or different, she said. Not worse, just more settled. He considered that. I had to learn how to sit with things. Claire smiled without meaning to. You were never good at that. No, he agreed. I used to fix. Or leave. And now I stay, he said. At least long enough to understand what I'm afraid of. Claire studied him, searching for the man who used to deflect with humor, who used to end conversations by kissing her forehead and saying it would all work out. This man didn't promise that. This man waited. Her phone buzzed in her bag, startling her. She didn't check it. She already knew what it would be, some reminder of the life she was supposed to return to. Daniel noticed anyway. You should probably go. Claire nodded. I probably should. Neither of them moved. The letter still lay between them, untouched, like a boundary neither was ready to cross. Claire reached out and pushed it toward him this time. Hold on to it, she said. Daniel's fingers closed around it slowly. Are you sure? Yes, she said. If I'm going to read it, I want to know I chose to. Daniel nodded, something like relief flickering across his face. Claire stood, slipping her coat back into place. The armor returned easily. Fimily. Daniel stood as well, a fraction too close now. Not touching. Just aware. Thank you for coming, he said. Claire looked up at him, searching his face one last time. I don't know what this is yet. I'm okay with not knowing, he said. She hesitated, then added, if we do this, whatever this becomes, it can't be about fixing the past. Daniel met her gaze. I wouldn't insult you by trying. Claire nodded once. She turned and walked toward the door, every step deliberate. She didn't look back until her hand was on the handle. Daniel was still there, watching her with an expression she couldn't read but felt all the same. She paused, just long enough to let the moment stretch. Then she stepped outside into the cold morning air, the bell above the door chiming softly behind her. The letter remained on the table, and so did the question she hadn't asked aloud, whether some truths, once spoken, ask more of us than we're ready to give. Claire didn't go straight home. She walked 2 blocks past where she'd parked, the cold air sharpening her thoughts, the noise of the street giving her something external to focus on. Cars moved with purpose, People crossed intersections without hesitation. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. She did not. She stopped at a corner and stood there longer than necessary, pretending to read a flyer taped to a lamppost. Her reflection stared back at her from a darkened storefront window, older, composed, steady. A woman who looked like she knew how to keep her life intact. Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it. Instead, she replayed the cafe in fragments. The way Daniel had held the letter. The way he'd said I stayed away because I was scared, not dressed up, not softened. Just there. The way that truth had landed in her body before her mind could assess it. She hated that. Claire turned back, retracing her steps without fully admitting that's what she was doing. She stopped short of the cafe entrance, standing outside where she could see in but not be seen easily. Daniel was still there. He sat alone now, his coffee finally lifted to his lips. The letter lay beside his hand, folded exactly as before. He wasn't reading it. He wasn't touching it. He looked like a man waiting for something he had already accepted might not come. Claire felt a familiar ache, sharp and unwelcome. She could leave. She should leave, but her hand reached for the door before she decided anything at all. The bell chimed. Again. Daniel looked up immediately. The shift in his face was subtle but unmistakable. Relief, carefully contained. He stood halfway, then stopped himself, as if unsure what the correct response was now. Claire closed the door behind her. The cafe smelled the same: coffee, milk, something faintly sweet. Nothing had changed. Everything had. I forgot something, she said. Daniel's eyes searched her face. Did you? She nodded once. The letter. His hand moved toward it instinctively, then stilled. I thought you wanted me to hold on to it. I did, she said. I still do. She walked back to the table and didn't sit. She stood across from him, close enough now that she could see the faint scar near his eyebrow, the one she used to trace with her thumb when she was half asleep. I don't want to read it, she said. Daniel's shoulders eased a fraction. Okay, I want you to tell me what's in it. He hesitated. That's not the same thing. I know, she said. That's why I'm asking. Daniel looked down at the letter, then back up. Some things were easier to write than say. Claire folded her arms, steadying herself. Try anyway. He pulled out the chair but didn't sit. He stayed standing, meeting her at eye level. I wrote that I loved you, he said. Claire felt that land clean and direct. I wrote that leaving wasn't about you being too much. It was about me being too little. Too afraid to grow fast enough to deserve what you were asking for. Claire's jaw tightened. She didn't interrupt. I wrote that every year since, I've measured things against what we almost had. Not because it was perfect, he added quickly, but because it was honest. Her chest ached. I wrote that if I ever saw you again, he continued, I wouldn't ask you to come back to who you were. I'd ask you to tell me who you became. Claire swallowed. And the rest, he said. Quieter now, his apology. Silence filled the space between them. Heavy but not hostile. Claire sat down slowly, the chair scraping softly against the floor. Her legs felt unsteady. Daniel remained standing. You can sit, she said. He did. Carefully, Claire stared at the tabletop, at the familiar chip in the wood. Do you know what I wrote? She said. Daniel looked up. No, I wrote a letter too, she said. I never sent it. Something shifted in his expression. What did you write? She met his eyes. I wrote that I hated you for leaving, and that I hated myself more for missing you. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. Claire? And that if you ever came back, I wouldn't let you. Daniel nodded slowly. You did build a solid life. Yes, she said. I did. They sat there, 2 letters between them that no longer needed paper. Claire leaned back, exhaling. This is the part where someone usually asks what happens next. Daniel gave a faint smile. I wasn't going to. Good, she said. Because I don't know. He nodded. Neither do I. Outside, the morning had shifted fully into day. Sunlight cut across the window, brighter now, less forgiving. Claire looked at him, really looked. At the man he was. At the man she had been with. At the space between those versions. "I'm not the woman you left," she said. "I know," Daniel replied. "That's the point. And I don't know if I want to be the woman who lets you back in." Daniel's voice was steady. "I wouldn't ask you to be." Claire studied him for a long moment. "Then why are you still here?" Daniel didn't hesitate this time. "Because even if nothing else happens, telling the truth matters." Claire felt that settle somewhere deep. She reached across the table and picked up the letter finally. She didn't open it. She just held it, letting the weight of it register. "Keep it," she said, pushing it back toward him again. "For now." Daniel accepted it with care. Claire stood once more. This time, when she turned toward the door, she felt something different, not resolution. Not relief. Permission. She paused with her hand on the handle. "Daniel," she said without turning. "Yes." "If this continues," she said slowly, "it has to be slow, honest. No rewriting history." "I wouldn't want anything else," he said. Claire nodded once. She stepped outside again. The bell chiming behind her. The cold air steadying her breath. She walked away this time without looking back. But the truth followed her. And she knew. With a clarity that unsettled her, that one conversation had already changed more than either of them had intended. Claire drove home with the radio off. The quiet felt necessary, like turning down the lights after something bright and sudden. Her hands rested easily on the wheel, but her thoughts refused to line up. They moved in circles, touching the same moments from different angles. As if one of them might finally tell her what it meant. She parked in her driveway and sat there longer than she needed to, the engine ticking as it cooled. The house looked the same as it always did, neat, dependable. The porch light still on from the night before. Safe. Inside. She set her keys down and hung her coat, moving through familiar motions. She poured a glass of water and drank it standing at the counter, staring out the kitchen window at nothing in particular. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she picked it up, a message from her sister. Something about dinner plans. Something normal. Claire typed a quick response and set the phone face down. As if that could keep the rest of the world from intruding, she leaned back against the counter and closed her eyes. Daniel's voice came back to her uninvited. "Leaving wasn't about you being too much. It was about me being too little." She opened her eyes and let out a breath. It would have been easier if he'd said something cruel. Easier if he'd blamed her ambition, her expectations, her refusal to settle. Those were things she'd learned how to carry. Fear was harder. Fear didn't have edges. Fear looked too much like her own. Claire walked down the hallway and stopped outside the spare bedroom. She didn't go in often. It had become a quiet place. Bookshelves, a desk she rarely used, boxes tucked neatly into the closet. She opened the door anyway. The room smelled faintly of paper and dust. Afternoon light angled through the blinds, striping the floor. She stood there, hands on the doorframe, letting the past hover without fully stepping into it. She'd kept more than she admitted. Not souvenirs. Not mementos meant to be revisited. Just things that hadn't felt urgent enough to throw away. Claire crossed to the closet and pulled down a small box from the top shelf. She set it on the desk and lifted the lid. Old notebooks. A few photographs. A folded letter she'd never mailed. She didn't touch it. She closed the box again and slid it back into place. Some truths didn't need to be reread to be real. Her phone buzzed once more. This time, it was a number she recognized but hadn't seen in years. Daniel. She stared at the screen, her pulse quickening despite herself. He hadn't said he'd call. He hadn't asked. He'd let her leave without expectation. That made the moment heavier. She let it ring twice more before answering. Hello, she said. "Hi," Daniel replied. His voice sounded different now, less contained, more exposed. "I wasn't sure if I should." "You're allowed," she said. "To call." A pause. "I just wanted to say thank you. For coming back. For listening." Claire closed her eyes. "I didn't do it for you." "I know," he said gently. "That's why it mattered." She leaned against the desk, grounding herself. I meant what I said. If this continues, it has to be slow. I heard you, he said. I'm not in a hurry. That makes one of us, she said. Surprising herself with the truth of it, Daniel let out a quiet breath. I'll follow your lead. Claire hesitated. Don't. He was silent. I don't want you following, she clarified. I want you walking beside me. If we do this at all. Another pause, longer this time. I can do that, he said. Claire felt something ease in her chest. Not resolve, not certainty. Just space. Good, she said. Then maybe next time we don't meet somewhere neutral. Daniel's voice softened. Where would you want to meet? She considered the question, the way it asked for more than logistics. I don't know yet, she said honestly. I'll tell you when I do. I'll wait, he replied. They stayed on the line a moment longer, neither quite ready to hang up. Claire, he said quietly. Yes, I meant it. About wanting to know who you became. She looked around her kitchen, at the life she'd built piece by piece. That's a longer conversation. I'm not going anywhere. Daniel said. She believed him. Neither am I, she replied. They said goodbye without ceremony. Claire set the phone down and stood there, listening to the house settle around her. The afternoon light shifted, warming the walls. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car passed. Life continued, unchanged and altered all at once. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know what she was ready to risk, or what it would cost to be honest again. But she knew this. Some conversations don't end when you leave the room. They follow you home and wait. The next morning. Claire woke before her alarm. The house was quiet in that early, suspended way. No traffic yet, no voices. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, letting herself feel where she was. Safe, alone, awake. Daniel's face came to her uninvited, not as he'd looked years ago, but as he was now, measured, attentive, unguarded in a way that felt deliberate. She turned onto her side and closed her eyes, willing the image away. It stayed. Claire got up and made coffee, the routine grounding her. She stood at the counter as it brewed, watching the dark liquid fill the pot, steam rising in a familiar, comforting rhythm. Half and half, just like she'd told him. She carried her mug to the small table by the window and sat down, pulling her robe tighter around herself. Outside, the sky was pale and undecided, the sun still negotiating its way in. Her phone lay face down beside her. She didn't touch it. Instead, she thought about the question he hadn't asked, the one hovering between them, like a held breath. What now? Claire had built a life on careful choices, ones that made sense, ones that didn't rely on hope behaving itself. She'd learned how to be content without asking too much from anyone. That was the life Daniel had walked back into, or close enough to cast a shadow. She took a sip of coffee and let herself remember the way he'd said her name. Not like an apology, not like a demand, just like it still belonged to her. The phone vibrated once against the table. She flinched, then steadied herself before turning it over. A text message. Daniel, I meant what I said. No expectations, just honesty. I hope your morning is gentle. Claire stared at the words longer than necessary. She typed, erased, typed again. Claire, it is. Thank you. She set the phone down and immediately regretted how neutral it sounded. Then she reminded herself that neutral was allowed. Necessary even. Morning passed in fragments. A load of laundry. A few emails answered. A grocery list scribbled on the back of an envelope. Normal things that usually anchored her. Today, they skimmed the surface. Around noon, she found herself back in the spare room without fully remembering how she'd decided to go there. Sunlight had shifted, illuminating the dust motes in the air, turning them into something almost graceful. She opened the closet again. The box waited, where she'd left it. Claire pulled it down and set it on the desk, slower this time. She lifted the lid and reached past the notebooks, past the photographs, until her fingers closed around the folded letter. Her letter, the paper was softer than she remembered, creased along the same lines she'd folded and unfolded 100 times, before finally giving up and tucking it away. She sat down and held it in both hands. I don't have to read you, she said aloud, as if the letter might argue back, but she did, not word by word. Not carefully. She skimmed the familiar anger, the grief dressed up as resolve, the promises she'd made to herself because she hadn't trusted anyone else to keep them. She folded it again and set it aside. What struck her wasn't how much she'd changed. It was how much she hadn't. Claire stood and walked back to the kitchen, letter still in hand. She opened the trash can, hovered, then closed it again. Not yet. Her phone buzzed once more. Daniel again. Daniel, no need to reply. Just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you today. Claire closed her eyes. This was how it began, she thought. Not with grand gestures. With small, steady reaches. The kind that didn't demand but still asked. She typed back before she could overthink it. Claire, I'm thinking too. That's the part I didn't expect. The response came a minute later. Daniel, neither did I. Claire smiled despite herself. The expression brief and unguarded. She set the phone down and leaned against the counter. The house quiet around her, the day still open. She didn't know where this would lead. She didn't know how much of herself she was willing to risk reopening. But she knew one thing with a clarity that made her chest ache. The past hadn't stayed where she'd left it. It had been waiting, and now that it had found its voice again, she wasn't sure she wanted to silence it. That evening, Claire went for a walk. It wasn't part of her routine. Normally, evenings were reserved for dinner, a book, the low comfort of predictable hours. But the walls felt closer tonight, as if the house had absorbed too much of her thinking. The air had cooled, carrying the faint smell of rain. Streetlights flickered on one by one, slow and steady. She walked past familiar houses, past lawns she'd seen in every season, past lives that looked settled from the outside. She wondered how many of them were. Her phone was in her pocket. She didn't check it. She didn't need to. The awareness of it was enough. At the end of the block, she slowed, then stopped altogether. The park sat quiet across the street, mostly empty at this hour. A few benches. A walking path. Trees that had seen more than they let on. Claire crossed over and sat on one of the benches, folding her hands in her lap. The wood was cool beneath her palms. She thought about the man she'd married once. Thought about the years after. The ways love could exist without romance. The ways it could leave without disappearing. Daniel wasn't a ghost. That was the problem. He was real, present, willing to stand still long. Enough to be seen. Claire leaned back and looked up at the darkening sky. Her phone vibrated. She sighed, then pulled it out. Daniel, I'm sorry if I'm reaching too much. Tell me if I am. Claire stared at the message. This, too, was different. The asking. The willingness to be told no. She typed slowly. Claire, you're not reaching. Just don't fill the silence for me. A pause. Then call on Daniel. Understood. Claire slipped the phone back into her pocket, surprised by the small surge of relief she felt. Boundaries had always come easier to her than vulnerability, but this required both. She stayed on the bench until the air cooled further, until the streetlights hummed steadily overhead. When she finally stood, she felt steadier, as if some internal argument had quieted enough to let her breathe. Back home, she made a simple dinner and ate it at the counter. She washed the dishes immediately, the warm water grounding her. By the time she changed into her pajamas, the house felt like hers again. She went into the spare room one last time before bed. The box still sat on the desk. Claire picked it up and carried it to her bedroom instead, setting it on the dresser. Not opening it, just letting it be closer. That night she dreamed of the cafe, not the conversation. Just the table. The letter. Daniel's hand resting nearby, not touching hers, but close enough to feel the warmth. She woke with her heart beating faster than usual. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and forgiving. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet. Her phone buzzed on the knitstand. New message. Daniel, I'm free Saturday morning if you want to talk again. If not, I'll understand. Claire closed her eyes. Saturday was 3 days away. 3 days to decide how much truth she was willing to face. 3 days to remember who she'd been, and consider who she might still become. She picked up the phone and typed. Claire, Saturday morning is fine. Somewhere quiet. The reply came almost immediately. Daniel, I'll find a place. Thank you. She set the phone down and lay back. A mix of nerves and something like anticipation settling in her chest. Saturday. Another conversation. And this time, she knew there would be no letter between them to soften the words. Only whatever they were brave enough to say out loud. Saturday arrived with a pale, steady light. Claire woke early again, but this time she didn't fight it. She showered, dressed carefully, not to impress, not to armor herself, but to feel like herself. Soft sweater, dark jeans, shoes she could walk in if she needed to. She paused in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not searching for flaws, just taking inventory. She drove across town with the windows cracked, the air cool against her skin. Daniel had texted the address the night before. A small park near the river, quiet, benches spaced far enough apart to allow privacy without isolation. Thoughtful. She parked and sat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. Her heartbeat was steady, but there was an awareness beneath it, like a low hum. This mattered. Daniel was already there when she arrived. He stood near the water, hands in his coat pockets, staring out at the slow-moving river. He turned when he heard her footsteps on the gravel path, and something in his posture softened when he saw her. Not relief this time. Respect. Double quotes. Hi, he said. Hi, she replied. They stood a few feet apart, the space intentional. The river moved quietly beside them, carrying leaves and small branches past without pause. I'm glad you came, Daniel said. So am I, Claire answered. Surprised again by the truth of it, they began walking without deciding to, following the curve of the path. The rhythm of their steps settled something between them, gave the conversation somewhere to go. Daniel spoke first. I thought about what you said, about not rewriting history. Claire nodded. Good. I don't want to explain away what I did, he continued, or ask you to see it differently. I just want to tell you how it felt from where I stood. She considered that. That's different. I hope so, he said. They walked in silence for a few moments. Birds lifted from the water's edge as they passed. I was angry, Claire said suddenly. For a long time. Daniel didn't interrupt. I told myself I wasn't, she went on. I told myself I was practical, resilient. But anger is quieter when you dress it up. Daniel nodded. I deserve some of it. Yes, she said. You did. He accepted that without flinching, and something in her eased. They reached a bench overlooking the river and sat, leaving a careful space between them. The wood was cold through her jeans. I don't know what I'm open to, Claire said. And I won't pretend I do. But I won't lie either. Daniel turned toward her fully now. That's all I'm asking for. She looked at him then, really looked. At the lines time had drawn and the steadiness it had given him in return. I don't want promises, she said. I want consistency. Daniel nodded once. I can offer that. And if at any point this feels like too much, she added, I'll say so. And I expect you to hear it. I will, he said. Even if it's hard. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. They sat there, the river moving, the morning opening around them. No grand declarations. No reaching hands. Just two people choosing to stay present. After a while, Daniel spoke again. Can I ask you something? Claire glanced at him. You can ask. What made you come back into the cafe? She smiled faintly. Because I realized I wasn't done being honest. Even with myself. Daniel considered that. I'm glad you did. So am I, she said. They stood a little later and walked back toward the parking lot. When they reached the place where their paths would split, they stopped. No hug, no touch, just shared ground. I'll see you again, Daniel said. Not asking. Claire met his gaze. Yes, you will. She watched him walk away, then turned toward her own car. The air felt lighter than it had all week, not because anything had been resolved, but because something important had been named. She drove home knowing this was no longer about the past alone. It was about what happens when two people stop pretending they are finished, and whether honesty, once chosen, can be put down again or only carried forward. The call came that afternoon. Claire was halfway through reorganizing a kitchen drawer that didn't need reorganizing when her phone rang. An unfamiliar number lit up the screen. She let it ring once, twice before answering, already annoyed at herself for feeling a flicker of anticipation. Hello? Claire? A woman's voice, calm, measured, not young. Yes. This is Margaret Ellis. Claire paused, her hand still resting on the edge of the drawer. I'm sorry, I'm Daniel's sister. The room seemed to tilt, just slightly. Not enough to knock her off balance. Enough to make her aware of her footing. Oh, Claire said. Hello, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Claire closed the drawer slowly. No, it's fine. There was a brief silence, the kind people use to decide how much truth to offer a stranger. I wouldn't normally reach out, Margaret said. But Daniel mentioned he'd seen you. And I thought, it might be better if you heard from me first. Claire leaned against the counter, the cool surface grounding her. He didn't say anything about this. I know, Margaret replied. He wouldn't, that's why I'm calling. Claire exhaled. About what? Margaret didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice softened. About the fact that Daniel is not as free as he may appear. Claire felt her chest tighten. Free how? She asked. Margaret hesitated. Emotionally, circumstantially, however you want to define it. Claire closed her eyes. Not in despair. In focus, he's seeing someone, Claire said. Yes, Margaret replied. Not casually. The word landed heavier than it should have. How long? Claire asked. Nearly 3 years. Claire absorbed that quietly. 3 years wasn't a fling. It wasn't a placeholder. It was a life in progress. She knows about me, Claire said. Margaret sighed. She knows about the past. She doesn't know about the present. Claire opened her eyes. The kitchen looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago. Orderly, neutral, deceptively calm. And you're telling me this because, Claire said carefully, because I've watched my brother spend his entire life avoiding difficult conversations. Margaret said. And I don't want you to be collateral damage. Collateral damage? Claire almost laughed. Almost. I appreciate your honesty, she said. But I'm not sure this is your place. It isn't, Margaret agreed. That doesn't make it untrue. Silence stretched between them. I'm not asking you to walk away, Margaret added. I'm asking you not to walk in blind. Claire nodded, even though Margaret couldn't see it. Thank you. They said goodbye politely. No drama. No warning sirens. Claire set the phone down and stood, very still. Daniel hadn't lied. He also hadn't told her everything. She thought about the river, the bench, the way he'd said he wasn't going anywhere, the way that had felt reassuring instead of threatening. She picked up her phone again, stared at his name, then set it back down. Not yet. That evening, Daniel texted. Daniel, I've been thinking about you all day. I hope that's okay. Claire stared at the message for a long moment. Then she replied, Claire, we need to talk. The response came almost instantly. Daniel. Of course, when Claire looked around her kitchen. At the life she'd built on clarity and restraint. Claire. Soon, in person, 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Daniel. Okay. Claire set the phone down. She didn't feel angry. She felt something more dangerous. Disappointed, not in him, but in how easily hope had slipped past her defenses, and yet, even now, she wasn't ready to step away. She just needed to know exactly what she was stepping into. They met 2 days later. Claire chose the place this time, a quiet bar just off a side street, the kind that filled slowly and never got loud. Late afternoon light filtered through tall windows, catching dust in the air and turning it into something almost deliberate. Daniel was already there. He stood when he saw her, instinctive, then stopped himself halfway, uncertain. That hesitation told her more than any apology could have. Hi, he said. Hi, she replied, taking the seat across from him. They didn't order drinks right away. Neither of them seemed to want the buffer. Daniel studied her face, his expression open but wary. You sounded serious. I was, Claire said. He nodded. Okay. She appreciated that he didn't rush to fill the silence. That he waited. Your sister called me, she said. The effect was immediate. Daniel's shoulders tightened, not dramatically, but enough that she noticed. His gaze dropped to the table, then came back up. I didn't know she would, he said. I know, Claire replied. She made that clear. Another pause. What did she tell you? He asked. Claire watched him carefully as she answered. that you're not as free as you appear. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, like someone bracing for cold water. When he opened them, they were steady. She shouldn't have done that, he said. That's not what I asked, Claire replied calmly. He exhaled. No, it's not. Claire folded her hands together on the table. She said you've been seeing someone. For 3 years. Yes, Daniel said. The word didn't shake. It sat there between them. Undeniable. She doesn't know about me, Claire added. Daniel's jaw tightened. No, Claire leaned back slightly, creating space. Why? He didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room, not searching for escape but for language. Because I didn't know what this was yet, he said. And I didn't want to introduce chaos into something that might still be nothing. Claire tilted her head. You don't get to decide what's nothing for me. Daniel nodded. You're right. The ease of his agreement surprised her. It also unsettled her. How serious is it? She asked. He didn't hesitate. It matters. Claire absorbed that quietly. Does she love you? Claire asked. Daniel met her eyes. Yes, the honesty hurt more than evasion would have. And you, Claire said. Daniel's silence stretched just a beat too long. I care about her, he said finally. Deeply. Claire let out a slow breath. That wasn't my question. Daniel's gaze didn't waver this time. I don't know if love is the right word for how I feel about her anymore. Claire nodded, the motion small. But you once did, yes. And you once loved me, Claire said. Yes. The weight of that settled in. Claire looked down at her hands, then back up. Do you see the problem? I do, Daniel said quietly. I just didn't expect it to arrive like this. She almost smiled at that. Almost. Nothing ever does, she said. A server approached, asking if they wanted anything. They ordered coffee, more out of politeness than desire. When the server left, Claire spoke again. I won't be the reason someone else gets blindsided. Daniel nodded slowly. I wouldn't let that happen. You already are, Claire said, not accusing, just stating fact. Daniel flinched at that. The first visible crack. You're right, he said. And I need to handle it. Claire watched him. Handle it how? Daniel swallowed. By telling her the truth. Which truth? Claire asked. That you ran into someone from your past. Or that you reopened something you never closed. Daniel's mouth tightened. Both. Claire studied him. The man he was now older, steadier, still capable of fear. I won't ask you to choose, she said. That's not my role. Daniel's eyes searched hers. But you won't stay if I don't. Claire didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was calm. I won't stay in something built on partial honesty. With anyone. Daniel nodded, the movement slow and resolute. That's fair. The coffee arrived, steam curling upward. Neither of them touched it. Daniel looked at her, then really looked. I don't regret seeing you. Claire felt the truth of that tug at her. Neither do I, she said. That doesn't mean it doesn't cost something. Daniel sat back, the weight of the moment settling into his posture. I need time, he said. To do this right. Claire stood. Take it, she said. But understand something. He looked up. I'm not waiting in the wings, she continued. If you come back, it has to be because you chose honesty, not because you lost your nerve elsewhere. Daniel held her gaze. The room quiet around them. I hear you, he said. Claire picked up her coat as she walked toward the door. She felt the familiar pull care, history. Something unfinished, but this time she didn't turn back. And Daniel stayed where he was, staring at the untouched coffee. Knowing that whatever choice he made next would cost him something real. Daniel didn't follow her. That mattered more than, if he had. Claire walked to her car with steady steps. The late afternoon air cooler now, carrying the muted sounds of the street. She sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine, letting the quiet settle. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't said anything she couldn't stand behind, and still, her chest felt tight. At home, she moved through the evening deliberately. Dinner was simple. Dishes washed immediately. Lights dimmed one by one. Control had always been her way back to center. Yet when she finally sat on the couch with a book she'd already read once, the words refused to hold. Her phone lay on the coffee table. Face up. It didn't light up. Claire told herself she wasn't waiting. That she was simply aware. She went to bed early and slept poorly, drifting in and out of shallow dreams where conversations repeated themselves but never finished. When she woke before dawn, the house felt hollow in a way she couldn't ignore. She got up, wrapped herself in a sweater, and stood at the kitchen window watching the sky lighten. Somewhere a garbage truck rumbled past. Ordinary life insisting on itself. Her phone buzzed. She didn't reach for it right away. When she did, there was a single message, Daniel. I told her last night. Claire read it twice. Her pulse quickened, not with relief. Not with triumph, just with the awareness that something irreversible had happened. She typed back carefully. Claire, how did it go? Several minutes passed. She imagined him sitting somewhere quiet, choosing words, resisting the urge to soften what shouldn't be softened. Then call on Daniel. Hard, honest. She didn't deserve the timing. But she deserved the truth. Claire closed her eyes. Claire, is it over? This time? The pause was longer. Daniel. Yes. The simplicity of the word landed heavier than anything else. He could have said. Claire set the phone down and leaned against the counter, her breath unsteady. She hadn't wanted this to feel like a victory. It didn't. It felt like consequence. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel, I'm not asking for anything right now. I just needed you to know I chose clarity. Claire stared at the screen, the word clarity echoing in her mind. She typed. Claire, thank you for telling me. I'm sorry it hurt someone else. Daniel. So, am I? Another pause. Daniel. I understand if you need space. Claire considered that. Space had always been her instinct. The place she went to sort, to measure, to regain footing. But something in her resisted retreating into it completely. Claire. I don't need space. I need time. Daniel. I can do time. Claire smiled faintly, despite herself. The day unfolded slowly after that. She went for groceries. She answered emails. She returned a call she'd been putting off. The world didn't stop just because something inside her had shifted. By late afternoon, the weight of the morning pressed in again. She found herself back in the spare room, standing in front of the desk. The box sat where she'd left it days ago, no longer hidden, no longer avoided. Claire opened it. She took out her letter and unfolded it fully this time, smoothing the creases. She read it more carefully now, noticing the sharp edges of her younger voice. The certainty that had once felt like strength. She didn't tear it up. Instead, she folded it once more and placed it back in the box. Gentler this time. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel, I don't want to rush you. But when you're ready, I'd like to see you again. Even if it's just to talk. Claire sat on the edge of the bed. The letter box opened beside her. She thought about the cost of wanting more. The way honesty demanded payment upfront. The way choosing again meant accepting risk she'd sworn she was done with. She typed. Claire. Not yet. But soon. See. The reply came almost immediately. Daniel. I'll be here. Claire set the phone down and closed the box. She didn't know what she would choose next. She only knew that the story between them had crossed a threshold. It was no longer about what had been left unsaid. It was about what they were willing to live with now. And that was a decision neither of them could make lightly. Claire agreed to see him a week later, not because she felt ready, because readiness, she'd learned, was often a luxury people used to avoid truth. She chose a weekday morning, a time that belonged more to intention than impulse. They met at a small botanical garden on the edge of town. Quiet paths, winter-bare trees, benches placed with thought. It felt appropriate, nothing blooming yet. Everything waiting. Daniel was there when she arrived, standing near a map posted at the entrance. He looked thinner, not unwell, just worn, like someone who hadn't slept enough since making a hard decision. Hi, he said. Hi, she replied. They walked without touching, the gravel crunching softly beneath their feet. The air was cold enough to sharpen conversation, warm enough to stay outside. I'm glad you came, Daniel said. I said I would, Claire replied. That's still something I keep my word about. He smiled faintly. I remember. They passed a greenhouse, its windows fogged from the inside. Claire stopped there, resting her hand against the glass, feeling the warmth trapped behind it. Before we go any further, she said, there's something I need to ask you. Daniel turned to face her fully. Okay, are you grieving? She asked. Or are you relieved? He didn't answer right away. I'm both, he said finally. And I don't want to pretend otherwise. Claire nodded. Good, he studied her. You don't look surprised. I'm not, she said. If you weren't grieving, I'd worry more. They continued walking. A gardener waved from a distance. Life again, insisting on normalcy. Daniel spoke carefully. I know this doesn't mean we pick up where we left off. No, Claire said. It means we're starting somewhere harder. He accepted that without resistance. They reached a bench overlooking a frozen pond. The surface was dull, opaque, hiding whatever still moved beneath. They sat. I need to say something. Daniel said. Claire waited. When my sister called you, he continued, I was angry at first. Not because she told you. Because she told you before I did. Claire watched him closely. That matters. It does, he agreed. It showed me I still default to delay when things feel complicated. And what did you do with that? Claire asked. Daniel looked out at the pond. I realized that if I don't confront that part of myself, I'll repeat it. With you. With anyone. Claire felt a quiet tightening in her chest. I won't survive another version of that, she said. Daniel turned to her. I know. They sat in silence for a few moments. Then Claire spoke again, her voice steady but weighted. There's something you don't know about me. Daniel's posture shifted. Okay, I didn't just move on after you left, she said. I rebuilt myself around not needing answers, around not wanting too much. That worked for a long time. And now, Daniel said softly, and now you're asking me to risk dismantling that, she replied. Not with words, with presence. Daniel absorbed that. I wouldn't ask if I didn't think I could meet you there. Claire looked at him. That's the thing. I don't know if you can yet. He didn't argue. Instead, he said, tell me what almost makes you walk away right now. The question surprised her with its directness. Claire considered it, then answered honestly. The part of me that knows how much it hurts when hope outruns reality. Daniel nodded slowly. That's fair. She met his gaze. And the part of me that's starting to care again. That landed. Daniel's voice lowered. I won't pretend I don't feel it too. Claire stood abruptly, the bench scraping softly beneath her. The sudden movement startled them both. I need to walk, she said. Daniel rose as well. Keeping distance, they moved along the path again, steps quicker now. Breath visible in the cold air. This, Claire said, gesturing vaguely between them. This is the dangerous part. Not the past. Not the letter. This. The present, Daniel said. Yes. They stopped beneath a bare oak tree. Its branches stretched wide and empty against the pale sky. Claire turned to him. If we keep going, something will break. Either the walls I built or the illusion that you're ready. Daniel met her gaze, unflinching. And if we stop? Claire exhaled slowly. Then I stay intact. And unfinished. They stood there, close but not touching. The tension sharp and unmistakable. For the first time since they'd reconnected, Claire felt the urge to step back, not out of fear, but out of self-preservation, and she realized, with a clarity that unsettled her, that the thing threatening to end this wasn't the past at all. It was how real the present was becoming. They didn't speak for a long moment. The oak tree stood bare above them, its branches reaching outward without apology. The wind moved through it softly, the sound like breath passing through memory. Claire was the first to step back. Not far. Just enough to breathe. I've been thinking about something, she said. Daniel waited. He had learned how. All my life, she continued, I believed that love meant endurance. That if you stayed long enough, if you tried hard enough, it would eventually reward you. Daniel nodded once. He didn't interrupt, and then I believed the opposite, she said. That love was the thing you survived. That you built a good life by limiting how much you needed from anyone. She met his eyes. I don't believe either of those things anymore. Daniel's voice was quiet. What do you believe now? Claire considered the question. The way it asked her to name herself, I believe love is a choice you make when you're not afraid of the cost, she said. And I believe I finally know what that cost is. Daniel's throat tightened. And you're willing to pay it? Yes, she said. But not the way we once did. He waited, heart clearly in his eyes now. I won't rebuild my life around you, she said. And I won't ask you to make me the center of yours. What I want is simpler and harder. Daniel's breath was shallow. Tell me. I want us to choose each other, Claire said, without erasing who we became apart. Daniel felt something settle in him then, something steady and real. I can do that, he said. Not perfectly, but honestly. Claire nodded. That's all I'm offering too. They stood there, the truth between them clear now. No illusion left to protect. No fantasy left to chase. Daniel took a step closer, not a reach. An invitation. Claire closed the distance herself. They didn't kiss. Instead, Daniel lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to stop him. When she didn't, he rested it lightly at her elbow, nothing possessive. Nothing promised beyond the moment. It felt like respect. Claire let out a breath she'd been holding for years. This isn't starting over, she said. No, Daniel agreed. It's starting differently. They walked back toward the parking lot side by side, their steps naturally falling into rhythm. When they reached the place where they would part, neither of them rushed it. I don't know what this looks like yet, Daniel said. Claire smiled faintly. Neither do I. But we'll keep choosing, he added. Yes, she said. As long as we both keep choosing. They stood there a moment longer. The quiet comfortable now, then Claire turned toward her car. Daniel watched her go. Not with fear this time, but with certainty. She looked back once, not out of habit, but intention. And she knew without question that whatever came next wouldn't be defined by what they'd lost. It would be shaped by what they were finally brave enough to choose.